Hi, and welcome to another episode of Lead, Learn, Thrive. I'm Pia, and whether you're listening while pretending your inbox doesn't exist for 5 minutes, or listening late at night when the house is finally quiet, I'm really glad you're here. I hope this episode gives you some space, not to prove productive, not to fix anything, just space to think honestly about what you're experiencing at work. Because today, I want to talk about something that a lot of people are living with, but very few people are willing to address. So let's dive in. Okay. There is a professional decline happening in many workplaces right now. Now, this isn't everywhere, and it's not all the time, but often enough that it's starting to feel familiar. And what makes it difficult to talk about is that it isn't caused by one thing. It's not just poor leadership. It's not just disengaged employees. It's not just pressure or change or the pandemic. It's a combination, a slow erosion happening on both sides of the working relationship. And that's really uncomfortable to admit. So let's start with organizations and leadership. In many workplaces, standards have shifted. Decision-making is rushed. Strategy is reactive rather than considered. People are stretched so thin and expected to absorb complexity without clarity. Important conversations are delayed. Another thing is difficult performance issues are often avoided, and responsibility quietly moves downwards without authority or support following it. Language has stepped in to soften this, such as agility, resilience, flexibility, and being commercial. But very often what those words are really masking is risks being transferred onto individuals rather than owned by leadership. And this has consequences. But let's be clear, this isn't a one-sided story, and I want to make that really clear. Because alongside that, we are also seeing changes in professional behavior. Some people are less resilient, not because they're weak, but because many have entered workplaces that no longer teach resilience well. Some people do disengage more quickly. Some expectations around effort, feedback, and progression are misaligned with reality. And in some environments, underperformance is tolerated or even protected because addressing it feels too complex, too risky, or too time-consuming. Or if there's some sort of political, cliquey, high school motivation going on behind the scenes. But when standards aren't upheld consistently, people stop trusting the system. And when the trust goes, motivation follows. So this is where things really start to unravel. Because what forms is a quiet kind of stalemate. Organizations feel frustrated that people aren't like they used to be, and employees feel frustrated that work isn't what it used to be. And instead of honest dialogue, both sides retreat into the narratives. So leaders talk about entitlement and attitude, and employees talk about toxicity and burnout. So sometimes both are right, and sometimes both are just avoiding the harder truth. So in that gap, something else does creep in. Performance replaces professionalism. Looking busy matters more than thinking well. Saying the right things matter more than doing the right things. Visibility starts to outweigh contribution, and people learn what is safe, not what is right. And for those who still care about quality like I do, and integrity, and doing work properly, this creates friction. They're not just tired, they're conflicted. So this kind of decline doesn't just affect output, okay? It affects identity. So people start asking themselves, am I out of step? And I know I have. I've asked that quite often. Is it me who's changed? And why does this feel harder than it should? High standards are beginning to feel like a liability, Okay, caring starts to feel naive. Okay, and speaking honestly feels risky. And that's not because people are fragile, and it's because the rules of professionalism have become unclear. So this is the good bit. This is the part that we rarely talk openly about. Okay, when standards drift and accountability weakens, the people who pay the price are often the ones still trying. So they carry the work, they carry the emotional load, they smooth over the gaps, they protect outcomes. Not because they're asked to, but because they care. Okay, they care in what they're doing. They care in the outputs. They care in the professional identity that they carry. And over time, that care turns into exhaustion, cynicism, or even withdrawal. Okay, so here I want to breathe. Oh, so much. Okay, I want to pause here and invite you to reflect. Okay, not critically, but honestly. Where have you noticed standards slipping in your organization, your team, or even yourself? Where are expectations unclear, mismatched, or unspoken? And what do you find yourself compensating for, quietly, regularly, and without recognition? So these aren't questions of blame, okay? These are questions of awareness. Professional decline isn't about pointing fingers. Okay? It's about recognizing that many systems are operating without clear boundaries, shared standards, or honest conversations about responsibility and facing reality. And without those, even good people on all sides struggle to do their best work. Noticing this doesn't make you negative, and that seems to be quite often what it's perceived as. Okay, but it does make you attentive. So there's another part of this conversation that we don't often include, and that's the role we play as customers. Okay, so flipping that lens. Because professional decline doesn't only show up in the workplaces. It shows up in the services we receive, the systems we interact with, and the standards we quietly accept. So think about how often we experience something that isn't quite right. A rushed interaction, poor communication, a service that falls short, and how rarely we respond in a balanced, constructive way. We tend to do one of two things, okay? We either say nothing at all and just say it is what it is, and we move on. We shrug, we move on, we tell ourselves it's not worth the effort. Or we wait until we're really frustrated, and then feedback comes out that is sharp, emotional, or public, often online and without context. So what's missing more often than not is measured, honest feedback. The kind that says, this part worked well, this part didn't, and here's why it mattered. Okay. So when feedback disappears, standards drift. Organizations don't learn, good practice isn't reinforced, and poor practice becomes normal, not because people want it to, but because no one interrupts it. Silence gets misread as satisfaction, shrugs get mistaken for acceptance, and slowly, oh so slowly, everyone adjusts expectations downwards. Many of us avoid feedback because we don't want to be seen to be difficult, we assume nothing will change, and we're tired of systems that feel unresponsive. And sometimes we simply don't believe our voices matter. But opting out of feedback entirely doesn't protect standards, it quietly lowers them. Just as unfiltered criticism doesn't improve quality either. Healthy professional cultures rely on feedback that is specific, proportionate, and fair. Feedback that recognizes what is working and names what isn't without personal attacks. And that's quite difficult, especially I think with how people have been feeling post-pandemic, which is still rumbling on, by the way. And if we want better leadership, better services and better systems, we have to be willing to participate in them more honestly, not just as employees, but as customers and clients too. Okay, here's a question worth sitting with, okay? Where have you stopped giving feedback? not because things are fine, but because you're tired. And where might thoughtful, balanced feedback help prevent the very decline we're frustrated by? Okay? This isn't about complaining more, okay? It's about caring enough to respond. Okay? Because professional standards aren't maintained by roles or titles alone. They're maintained by everyday behaviours, including the ones we choose when it could be easier to say nothing at all. And as we come to the end of this episode, I want to leave you with a thought that connects all of this together, because there was an awful lot in this one. Okay? Professional decline doesn't happen because one group gets it wrong. It happens when standards become unclear, as I've said, when responsibility gets diluted, and when too many people, leaders, employees, customers, quietly opt out of honest engagement. It happens when organizations avoid difficult conversations, when individuals disengage rather than speak up, and when we, as customers, stop giving thoughtful feedback, either because we can't be bothered, which I think is a common thing at the minute, or because we don't believe it will make a difference. Again, a common narrative. None of that makes anyone a bad professional. It makes us human in a complex, pressured system. Okay? But it does have consequences, because when we all shrug at small declines, they don't stay small for long. The encouraging part in this, the same everyday choices that allow standards to erode, are also the ones that help rebuild them. So clarity over silence, feedback over avoidance, care over performance, not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently. So wherever you sit as a leader, a team member, a client, or a customer, this isn't about carrying more responsibility than is fair. It's about staying conscious of the part you do have. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you for spending this time with me. And I'd like to send a special thanks to those who've subscribed from Poland, the US, Malta, and the UK. Wherever you're heading next today, I hope you take with you this reminder. Professional standards aren't sustained by policies or slogans. They're sustained by everyday choices, including the choice to speak honestly, respond thoughtfully, and not quietly accept what we know could be better. If you've enjoyed this podcast as much as I've enjoyed making it, please subscribe and join us again next week. Until next time, take care, keep leading, keep learning, keep thriving.